We thank you for tuning in to the Score for the Cure's very own podcast. This group of volunteers started off partially as strangers and partially as friends, but we've all come together for an absolutely incredible cause. We knew that the ones that we loved and respected were directly affected by type 1 diabetes, which is also known as juvenile diabetes. This autoimmune disease is oftentimes very misunderstood. Many times the diagnosis comes at a very young age, 9 years, 4 years, even 11 months. Right now, there is no cure. JDRF dedicates countless time and effort into government advocacy and research. So, as we started talking about ways to raise funds, we noticed a connection between many of the people that we knew with type 1 and some sort of either love of hockey or playing hockey. So, we decided that that was the perfect fit. We could not be more excited to be holding this event with a goal of raising $50,000 to go to this absolutely incredible charity and aid in the much needed advocacy and research. Today we'll be hearing part one of a two-part series. Mother and son combo, Joanne and Mike Shaw, open up about the past 39 years of Mike's diagnosis. Being diagnosed at the age of 4.5 was pre-technology and pre-world as we know it today. You'll hear the diagnosis story, the practices, the learning curve, the highs, the lows. There's no questioning the love between these two, and I'm very grateful for the time that I got to spend with them learning about type 1 diabetes and the challenges that they faced then and still face today on a day-to-day basis. I'm here today with Michael and Joanne Shaw. Mike is a face in the CAI organization and has been for many years. We all know and love him and everything that he's done for the organization as a whole. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a very young age, and he's actually one of the main inspirations for doing this Score for the Cure event. He's also the brains behind all of the branding. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about the early years, your diagnosis story?
Sure. So I don't remember exactly how long it had been happening, but I was waking up in the morning or in the middle of the night sometimes, having wet the bed. And I have done it a lot. And you know, my parents were rightly concerned. I was 4 years old, so I was old enough to not be wetting the bed on a regular basis anymore. And yet it happened quite a bit. You know, and they tried a number of different things and nothing was working. So eventually they took me to my pediatrician, who my mom might remember his name. I certainly don't. You know, took me to the pediatrician. It's funny, my grandfather on my dad's side and my uncle on my dad's side both had type 1 diabetes. But it never occurred to my parents that that might be what was going on. Although increased urination, increased thirst are classic symptoms of type 1 diabetes. It just never really occurred to them that, hey, maybe that's what's happening. And we had blood work done. As I said, I was 4 years old, and the diagnosis came back just over a month before I turned 5. It was my dad's birthday when they notified us that, you know, that I had type 1 diabetes. So happy birthday, Dad. Oh. And yeah, it all started with accidents in the bed, which is, you know, a little bit embarrassing to talk about, but you know, it was just a way of life, and I couldn't stop it. Everything I tried wasn't working, and the problem was that my blood sugars were just so high that, you know, I drank a lot before I went to bed. We tried cutting that out. I tried not drinking anything before bed, but even still, my mom had a lot of laundry to do.
I thought you had a urinary tract infection or a bladder infection because, yes, you were 4, you were well potty trained. I only remember it happening a few times. Like I said, and when we made the doctor's appointment, it never occurred to me diabetes. I thought you had a urinary tract infection.
Which would have been easy. That would have been great.
Yeah.
That's an easy fix.
That March 5th, which was, yes, your father's birthday, was a Friday. Went to the pediatrician. I think his name was Dr. Holenda.
That sounds right. Shout out to Dr. Holenda if you're still practicing out there.
Oh, I think he's long gone. I think they must have done some kind of blood glucose test. Because we found out that same day, and Saturday morning, we were in Children's Hospital. His blood sugar was that high
Oh, wow.
that they had him admitted the following morning, Saturday morning, where we spent a week learning about how to take care of a 4-year-old with juvenile diabetes. And yeah, it was pretty devastating. I had a 3-year-old, and I was, no, what was Matt, 2.5?
That was, yeah.
And I was 5 months pregnant with the third.
You
Yeah.
had your hands full for sure. I have a 4-year-old niece and I can't keep up with her for 24 hours. So to have a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, 5 months pregnant, and then to find out something like that's challenging, right? And I'm sure it flipped everything upside down for you.
Oh my God, yeah, it was. I remember Mike's dad being really, really, really upset. He blamed himself because it was his side of the family, so it was his fault. And I was like, doesn't work that way. But he was very, very upset. We all were. I mean, but so we spent a week at Children's Hospital.
Yeah, I don't remember a ton about being 4 and 5 years old, but I can tell you that Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was
a godsend. Oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. They still do incredible work. But the degree of treatment that I received at the time, the degree of education, everything that they taught us, it doesn't just change one life; it changes everybody in the family's life.
Sure.
My brother and my sister had to learn what signs to look out for in case I was having a low blood sugar or high blood sugar, or if something was going wrong, they needed to know what to look out for. Certainly my parents needed to understand that, and so did I. And Children's Hospital of Philadelphia did wonders. Yeah.
Phenomenal education, not just for his dad and I, but for him. Even at 4, it was an amazing how much they included him in what was going on. Even as far as doing the, I think it was every couple of hours they would come in and do blood tests and stuff. And of course, whenever you want to get into what we dealt with once we got home, that's a whole other challenge.
I can imagine trying to corral a 4-year-old to do something that they definitely don't want to do, right?
There was no blood glucose. We did urine testing. I don't remember the entire procedure, but I know it took like 15 or 20 minutes, and it was a guess. You had a stick that you kind of used to see what color the urine was to determine whether it was high or low or somewhere in between.
Sure.
But it was a guess.
It's sort of like if you know anything about testing the chlorine in your pool.
Mm-hmm.
You dip the little strip in, and then you hold it up to the vial, and you have to match the color that the strip turns. That's exactly what it's like.
They're very similar to that. I have a touch of OCD, so I developed this system, these books that I made, these charts. And I bought these books, and I would chart time of day, the testing, what the results were, what I fed him, how much insulin, how much activity. Each day had 15 different boxes of what I would fill in 3, 4, 5 times a day. I guess we only tested, I don't remember.
At least 3 times a day.
Probably.
To start, I would have tested breakfast, lunch, and dinner before each meal.
Okay.
But I think that there were times, certainly depending on how I felt, we would test more often.
Yeah.
And when Mom says that she drew this chart, she filled the chart out, she did all of the work. I did very little of it.
Well, at 4, you didn't do any of it.
Well,
Yeah.
My handwriting was good at 4. My discipline, however, has never been good. It certainly wasn't at 4 and 5. So yeah, she would make these charts, which we're talking pre-internet, we're talking pre-mobile devices and apps. Today, you can download the sort of thing that my mom designed. It's a shame she didn't patent it.
Oh, I should have patented it.
Right?
Yeah, that would have been rich.
We could both be retired.
I'm retired.
Oh, you are retired. I could be retired.
Yeah, you could.
I could be living off the residuals. But yeah, so necessity really was the mother of invention, and my mother was the mother who invented. All of the stuff that we needed to keep me on track. We came up with, and between her and my dad, they kept me on task. And eventually I learned how to know what my body was telling me. You can tell when your blood sugar is high. You can tell when it's dropping. It's certainly not a science. It's not exact. You still need the testing. You still need the tracking. But there were times in my life, Nicole, where I went a lot longer than I care to admit without testing regularly. And I got by just by feel. And nobody should ever try doing that. It was a terrible idea. And I'm lucky I survived my 20s.
Yes, well, he did that when he left my house.
Right. That was college and early 20s.
Because all through high school, we kept those books.
Yeah. And again, you kept those books. You did the bulk of the work. I took over to a degree.
Well,
but I needed you to keep me in check for sure.
When you were, how old were you? We found a diabetes camp that wasn't all that far from where we lived. In fact, was close to where I grew up in the country, called Camp Firefly. And I think it's 6.
Yeah, would have been my first year.
Might have been his first year there. And I credit them also for it was strictly for juvenile diabetic kids. They taught him how to give his own shots, because up until then, it was usually me that gave the shots. But Camp Firefly, I was a basket case. I'm letting my baby go away overnight to a camp without me.
Not just overnight, it was a week or two.
Well, it was a week, and then you called and begged and screamed and cried to stay for a second week.
Yeah, great. That's where I learned to swim, I think.
Yeah.
They had all kinds of great activities, and yeah, it was a tremendous experience, and it's a shame they folded several years later.
You went what, 2 or 3 years?
2 or 3 years, and
they had requested for you to be a counselor, but I think they closed then.
They closed before I had a chance. Yeah, by the time I was ready for high school, had they still been open, I certainly would have been a counselor. It was a huge imprint on my life, and really made a difference.
Well, and I think being associated with all of the other young kids, boys and girls, who dealt with the same thing every day that Michael had to deal with. Mm-hmm. The testing and the watching what you eat, the exchange. Back then it was all about exchanges and how much food wasn't so much calories, but it was everything was in exchanges. And I remember so little of that.
That really was like rocket science. I mean, it was complicated to figure out.
Yeah,
for sure.
But I credit them with because then he went to kindergarten, and I was a basket case, but always made sure he had a snack, made sure the teachers knew what was going on, made sure they knew what he could and couldn't have. And by that time, I don't ever remember him at that age really rebelling. It wasn't until he was a teenager.
High school is when I started being difficult.
Knew it all.
Right.
Were the teachers supportive? Did they understand?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, I don't know that understand would be the right word, but they were willing to learn and interested in learning, and and some of them learned hard lessons. There were times where I would say, I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I had accidents in kindergarten. And again, there would be the call home, and it wasn't. My parents weren't. Well, my son did something wrong. They said when he says he has to go to the bathroom, he needs to go to the bathroom. Give him a pass, let him go. And it got to the point where they understood that. Yes, I needed to be treated like everybody else, but I had other challenges. And there were things that if I needed to go to the nurse, I wasn't trying to get out of the test.
Right.
Most of the time. If I had to go to the bathroom, it was because I had to go to the bathroom. I wasn't trying to go goof off.
Right.
So there was a learning curve for sure. But the teachers learned fairly quickly, and the other thing that was helpful is that my classmates learned. They understood what was happening, probably even more quickly than the teachers did.
Well, I supplied the teachers once again with a boatload of pamphlets and information and written materials, and this is what to look out for. This will indicate whether he's high. This will indicate whether he's low. And I probably frustrated them with the amount of information that I provided, but I did it as much for me as I did it for them. This was my kid I was entrusting to them, but it was a very small Catholic elementary school. His class was a very small class.
Never more than 36 kids.
Oh, and the kids were really supportive. And he's right. They looked out for him, and of course, if there was field trips and all, I was the first mom. I was actually invited. I was told I was going.
Mom chaperoned pretty much every trip we ever took in grade school.
Yeah, yeah. For the most part, all through school, and there was a couple of instances outside of school, like birthday parties and stuff like that. But the parents understood, and I think you were the only kid in that class, obviously, that was diabetic.
Oh,
but
yeah, for sure.
It became a way of life.
I didn't grow up eating chocolate bars all the time, eating, drinking regular soda and eating cake. And it was important for me to understand after my diagnosis that some of that was okay in moderation.
Right.
I didn't have to stop being a kid.
Yeah.
I had to be a smarter kid than was required of most kids. I couldn't go to the drugstore and get a candy bar every day. But once in a while, especially if my sugar were low, it was something that I could get away with.
And that made it easier, I think, for me too, because he was so young. I had control over everything. I cooked the meals, I fed him, I gave him his snacks, I did the insulin, I did the testing. I had total control, which was right up my alley. I loved every minute of that.
And yet, that being said, I never felt like I was being controlled. Sure. I never felt like, they have the term now about helicopter parents.
No.
That wasn't my mom. I could go to friends' houses, I could go to parties, I could participate in sports, and I did all of those things regularly. And I never felt like mom was watching at all times, or dad for that matter. So I think that you were able to establish a level of control that still made me feel like I was growing up like a normal kid. And
that was the goal. Sure, that was the goal. Although with sports and stuff, we were all. His father coached most of the sports he played, so we were constantly at the soccer field or at the baseball field or at the basketball court or the bowling alley, and we did them all. We did every one of them. So did his brother and his sister. So we were totally involved. But that made it seem that much more natural because we were there anyway. Now, yes, when we were on those fields, I always had an extra snack in my bag in
Sure.
case he had a reaction or whatever. And even on those teams, the coaches, the parents, the other kids, they all knew the symptoms and the signs. And if Michael had to stop for whatever reason, mom had a snack ready for him or whatever. And I don't remember the testing and stuff being that much of a problem then. I don't even
really,
remember when we got into the glucose and stuff. I don't
It
remember.
was still fairly early, but yeah, I don't remember the exact time either.
That was through children's though, too.
Right.
I do want to go back to when he was little. There was a couple of occasions that were really, really, really scary. And I would play with different things that I would use to bring his sugar back. And for the most part, it was orange juice. I kept orange juice in the refrigerator. But he was having a low blood sugar episode, and I couldn't get him to drink the orange juice. He was that out of it.
It was probably within the first year or two.
It was in the first year
of my diagnosis.
Yeah,
I had been
for sure.
Out playing with friends. We had a park across the street from where we lived at the time. And I was playing in the park with friends. I think we were playing a pickup game of basketball. I played hard. I was competitive. I came in and instead of getting a snack, which is what I should have done, I took a nap and didn't wake up. I took a nap on the floor in the living room.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
See, I do remember something.
You remember that.
And mom came to check on me, and I wasn't waking up, and I wasn't, and she tried to give me orange juice, and that didn't work. So my parents rushed me to the hospital, and I think it's the only time I've ever been completely delusional, although some of my friends might argue otherwise. But I was hallucinating on the way to the hospital.
Oh, it was awful.
To this day, I remember seeing Disney animals hopping along the side of the road, and the face of this guy who kept laughing at me. He had Coke bottle glasses.
But you were screaming at him.
I was terrified of him.
And I was holding him. Forget about seatbelts. I was holding him as my husband drove. I don't even know what we did with the other two.
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Left them home, I guess. But got to the hospital as soon as we rushed him in, and we said to the staff, low blood sugar. They immediately took him to an exam room. One of the nurses kind of like smelled his breath and whatever, that fruity smell. So they knew immediately. But that was one of the scariest times. After that, I started carrying tubes of icing, cake icing, because that I could squeeze into his mouth without him
swallow it. Having it in my mouth
well, that was enough to get you. But that was probably one of the most frightening.
And it's funny. You asked Mom when did she stop worrying, and we went to Longwood through CAI for Mother's Day, and we were walking around and having a great time, and my blood sugar started to drop, and she didn't have anything, and she was beating herself up. As there's a snack stand right there. We got me something to drink, and it got my sugar back up, but I had glucose tablets in my car, and I forgot to bring them
in the car. Yeah, good place for them.
They were, in the parking lot. I had them with me. I just didn't have them on me. And she's sitting there as I'm drinking my lemonade and getting better, going, I can't believe I didn't bring anything. I said, I'm 44. This is not your job anymore. But she's
always
a
mother's job.
It never
right?
stops. Exactly.
Yeah, and of course I still worry about him because he's still my baby and
not that bright.
Well,
we thank you for tuning into part 1, and we encourage you to tune into part 2, where you will hear more about the stubborn teenage years of Mr. Mike Shaw and the benefits of a good doctor, good practices, and of course the importance of listening to your mother. And of course, we really hope that you join us on August 14th from 3 to 9 p.m. for our very first of what we hope to be many Score for the Cure events. This event will be featuring an exhibition hockey game with players from the age of 13 and up, a Revolution Loop, which is either a 1 mile or a 5K run walk, a cornhole tournament, live music, games, food, and fun for the entire family. Put it on your calendar today and figure out ways to join the team and raise funds toward our goal. Visit www.scoreforthecure.com for more information or email us directly at jdrfhockey@gmail.com. Play hockey, run, walk, volunteer, raise funds, raise awareness, come out and support the day. But most of all, spread the word. We can't wait to see you on August 14th in Warminster, Pennsylvania for Score for the Cure.